evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Tonight, President Trump mediates the conflict between Israel and Lebanon at the White House, all as he faces pressing questions over the timeline of his war with Iran. But President Trump says he will not be rushed.
So we were in Vietnam like for 18 years. We were in Iraq for many, many years. I've been doing this for 6 weeks. And their military is totally defeated. They're outside of the little wise guy ships. I call them the wise guy ships, the little boats that they have running around with guns in them. We'll take them out, too, when we see them.
Problem is, those little wise guy ships are having a big impact on the Strait of Hormuz, that critical waterway that has become the linchpin for peace talks with Iran. A day after the regime tried to assert its dominance in the strait, seizing 2 cargo ships, even posting this suspiciously staged dramatic video of one of those seizures, President Trump responded with his finger on the trigger. He is now ordering the Navy to shoot and kill any Iranian boats laying mines in the strait. He added that U.S. minesweepers are clearing the choke point, a process that a senior Pentagon official reportedly told lawmakers could take 6 months to do. A Pentagon spokesman pushed back on that, telling NewsNation that reported timeline is based on cherry-picked information. Now, all this is happening as the U.S. continues its own naval blockade of Iranian ports and ships. In an update today, CENTCOM said U.S. forces have redirected 33 ships since that operation began 10 days ago. The interdictions are happening outside the strait as well, as far away as the Indian Ocean, where the USS George W. Bush just arrived. It is now the 3rd aircraft carrier in the region. The Pentagon posted this video showing the military seizing a 2nd Iranian tanker carrying oil. According to marine traffic data, that tanker was taking oil to China, Iran's biggest trading partner. Meanwhile, the question remains, who's calling the shots in Iran? President Trump continues to claim the Iranian regime is plagued by infighting between the country's hardliners, whose fanaticism is mixed with a splash of pragmatism, and the die-hard hardliners who take their radical Muslim ideology straight up.
They have all new leadership, and they're fighting like cats and dogs for who's going to control. And because we've created a real mess for them.
Iran's president and its parliament speaker were both quick to push back on that, posting statements just a minute apart in a show of unity against Trump today. They claimed there are no radicals or moderates in Iran. Instead, they are all Iranian and all revolutionary. Okay, but are they all still alive? We still haven't publicly heard from Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. According to the New York Times, Khamenei has trouble speaking. His face and his lips were badly burned in airstrikes. And he's awaiting a prosthetic for one of his legs, on which surgeons have operated now 3 times. We're going to have analysis on all those urgent developments in just a moment. Let's begin, however, with NewsNation's Kelly Meyer, who's live for us at the White House, where the president just met with representatives from both Israel and Lebanon. Kelly, Trump says the ceasefire is now extended between them for 3 weeks. What happens next?
Yeah, it's a good question, Elizabeth, and this buys them some time, but it's unclear if they're going to be able to achieve peace with another 3 weeks. And the president keeps saying that this deal between Lebanon and Israel has nothing to do with his negotiations with Iran, but he certainly is working hard to get that deal between Israel and Lebanon. He moved the meeting from the State Department over here to the White House so he could be personally involved in this. Here's more.
We're going to help them. They're great people. It can be a really good country again, maybe a great country again. And I think you have all the ingredients. So we're going to work together. And I think Israel's going to be terrific. But they do have a common problem. It's Hezbollah.
And it gives everybody time to continue to work on what's going to be a permanent peace between 2 countries that want to be at peace. Both are victimized by the same terrorist organization. A terrorist organization that no doubt has victimized Israel, but has also victimized the people of Lebanon.
And And in the meantime, today, Elizabeth, Hezbollah, as they were mentioning, they're firing rockets at northern Israel. They say that's in response to ceasefire violations by Israel. The Iran-backed militant group said this in a statement, quote, in defense of Lebanon and its people and in response to the Israeli enemy's violation of the ceasefire and its targeting of the towns in southern Lebanon. We targeted Hezbollah targeted the settlement in Israel. So the IDF is saying that Hezbollah's attacks are, quote, blatant violations of the ceasefire understanding. So still some back and forth there, even though they are saying the ceasefire has been extended for another 3 weeks. And another thing, Elizabeth, the president is saying that he wants to welcome the leaders of both Israel and Lebanon to the White House during this ceasefire extension. So somewhere in this 3 weeks, Elizabeth.
That will be an interesting meeting, and I think this ceasefire is hanging by a thread. We shall see if it lasts. President Trump wants it to, and that carries a lot of sway. Kelly Meyer, live from the White House, thank you. Let's get analysis now from our panel. Brent Sadler is a retired Navy captain who's a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Hosfro Isfahani grew up in Iran and is now the research director for the National Union for Democracy in Iran. And Gordon Chang is a world-renowned expert on China, a senior fellow with the Gatestone Institute and author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America. Great to have all of you here. So, Brent, I'm going to start with you. President Trump said outright, we don't know who the leader of Iran is. And then, after saying Iran has a number of days to get back on any peace deal, he said, don't rush me, which I don't think anybody wants to rush him. This needs calmness and deliberation, right?
Yes, but at the same time, the pressure is the only thing, the military pressure is the only thing that the regime in Tehran is going to respond to, no matter how fractured they are. And I'd say that fracturing, that breaking apart of the regime leadership, that's exactly what is intended to provide the Iranian people an opportunity to take back their country. And certainly, there is no capitulation on the U.S. side or concessions on the U.S. side that need to be even considered at this point. The threat at the shipping is one I think is an opportunity missed to send the point home when they actually captured the vessels from MSC, the company of MSC, but also when they attacked over the weekend. There should have been reprisals against the IRGC forces involved in their shoreside bases as well. But
then Iran would have said we're violating the ceasefire.
Well, they said that already.
That's true. Hosfro, there are several new reports out today that it's really the hardline generals who are calling the shots, that the new Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei is still recovering from severe injuries. His leg was amputated, his face disfigured, that he's surrounded by doctors treating him and communicates with the generals by writing handwritten notes and then sending them through a chain of human couriers, which sounds incredibly dark ages-like in terms of how you communicate, but they're so paranoid that Israel in particular will track them, that they're doing this to keep him secret. What do you make of this?
The thing with Mojtaba is that this man never had any political life, any credibility, any popular support. He is the first AI-generated supreme leader the world has seen to itself. The man is absolutely irrelevant. He has no sway over the population or the regime itself. The decisions are made by the core of the Islamic Republic, which, as always, is acting as a monolith, unified. We are seeing reports about divisions within the regime, but those divisions are only about their share of the spoils of the Islamic Revolution, not about policy, not about strategy, not about export of terrorism, not about pursuit of weapons of mass destruction. When it comes to all of these policies, the Islamic Republic is a unified monolith that is a threat to the free world.
How are we going to get a deal with those people then?
You can't. You either kill them all or force them into accepting absolute humiliating surrender. Nothing in between would work with the Islamic Republic.
Gordon, the president said today that, quote, we have total control of the strait, and that, quote, I am the one who has kept it closed. That is not technically true. We may be blockading Iranian ships, but Iran is blocking everybody else from going through.
Yes, but really what we're doing right now is we're starving the regime, because they depend upon that strait being open to export oil, but they also need commodities that come through that strait, and they need refined gas. So what the president has been doing is essentially cutting off revenue streams. Now, there are other revenue streams they have. They got pipelines. But right now, I think we're doing a pretty good job. So, yes, we don't totally control the strait, but we're doing what we need to do, which is to stop Iran from getting revenue and getting important commodities.
Today, Gordon, the United States seized a second tanker in the Indian Ocean. And this is, by the way, far outside the Strait of Hormuz, but it was full of oil, Iranian oil, headed to China. This is a sign that President Trump is flexing and stretching this blockade far from the strait, and it is not going to make China happy.
No, certainly not. And the Navy announced that it was going to enforce this blockade everywhere in the world. And that's exactly what's happened with the second seizure in the Indian Ocean. You know, right now, China, in the beginning of this war, China was getting what it wanted. The strait was open for Chinese imports and exports through the Strait of Hormuz. We weren't getting our ships through. Right now, because of the blockade, China is going to have some problems. Now, one of the things, though, is that we're seeing some very interesting signs of what's happening inside China's economy. They may not need all the oil they're getting because their demand is, I think, deteriorating fast. And that's a real indication that this is having an effect on China's economy. And I think Chinese leaders need to, at some point, get peace, because if they don't, they could very well face extreme problems at home.
Brent, what could the Chinese do to force peace on, force these Iranians, these, as Hosfar was just talking about, these, radical lunatics in charge of Iran with a tight grip on the power structure? How is China going to force them to come to the table and make a deal?
The first thing they can do is stop buying any of the oil on these unlicensed or unregulated dark fleet ships and make it explicit. And then the second thing is to withdraw all visible diplomatic support or even any coverage that they're providing for the Iranian regime in pursuit of peace, and put all of the onus on the Iranians to cease. I think the diplomatic and the economic pressure is really all the Chinese have to play at this point. And I think that would also send a message to Tehran that they are increasingly isolated.
Yeah, Brent, President Trump also said today that Americans should be prepared to pay higher gas prices for some time. He said in return, America will have a nuclear-free Iran. And he said, quote, "I can't imagine anything worse than a nuclear weapon taking out Israel or a city in Europe." Do you think that will resonate with Americans who are largely, according to polls, not supportive of this war?
Well, a nuclear-armed Iran threatening blackmail or actually using such a weapon would cause really horrific inflation, if you really want to put it in pure pocketbook kind of terms, setting aside the human loss of that. And then what kind of world would that be? And a whole bunch of writing and academic research about nuclear arming of many of the countries across the region. That's a very dangerous and risky kind of future that I think should be fought to resist. And I think Americans understand that. Important to note, seasonally, gas prices go up about 50 cents in the summer months. We're coming up on that. So that adds upward pressure. But at the same time, the markets are adjusting. And I think you're going to see things play out by the end of the summer, before the elections, prices back down around $3 or so.
Hosra, what are you hearing about what's happening inside Iran right now? We all know that this regime doesn't care at all about the people of Iran, but there are 90+ million people living inside this country. What are conditions like for them as the United States is trying to use this economic pressure to force the regime to come up with a deal?
The Islamic Republic is using every last penny in its reserves to build up its military capabilities, send money to terror networks across the Middle East, and literally pursue this war without any attention to the Iranian population. When you talk with the folks inside the country, food prices has more than tripled in many cases. People cannot afford the basic staples. They are suffering extremely. And worse than that, the regime has cut the internet for 50 days, more than 50 days. And every night, thugs of this regime take to the streets shouting and chanting in celebration that they have defeated the great Satan, the United States, that the image that the Islamic Republic is projecting inside the country, they are celebrating their win against their all-time adversary, the United States. That cannot stand. Iranians know that if the war actually ends, if the regime receives a deal from the United States, it's going to turn its rage, its frustration, its defeat in face of U.S. military might against the Iranian people, and we are going to witness mass killings that we saw in the past again and again.
Oh, that is a very grim prognosis. Hey, Gordon, I have only 10 seconds left, but there are reports now that China is looking at mining the waters around Taiwan, taking a page from the Iranian handbook on how to exert economic pressure to get its way.
Yes, and Xi Jinping is bold enough to do that. But the Chinese military right now is not capable because of the purges. And so I think that we're going to see a China that will bluff and intimidate, but will not actually carry through on threats.
Let's hope not. Brent Sadler, Hosfro Isfahani, Gordon Chang, thank you all three for joining us tonight. Really, really appreciate it. All right, coming up for us, a Special Forces soldier has just been arrested for placing a secret bet on an op that he was about to take part in. He won nearly $500,000 and is now going to be the first person to be indicted for insider trading on Polymarket. This as Kalshi suspends 3 political candidates for betting on their own races. One of those men says he wanted to get caught. He joins me live next. And later, a victory for cannabis users, war on drugs. President Trump eases regulation on medical marijuana and reclassifies it as a less serious, dangerous drug. The tokers are stoked, but does the American public also think it's a great idea? All right, so breaking news tonight as federal prosecutors crack down on illegal betting using confidential government information. Just a short time ago, a federal grand jury handed up an indictment against an American soldier for unlawful use of confidential government information for personal gain, along with charges of theft and fraud. According to prosecutors, Gannon Ken Van Dyke made more than $400,000 on the prediction site Polymarket, betting on the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The indictment alleges that Van Dyke helped plan and execute the successful raid to capture Maduro, all while placing bets and then winning because he knew exactly what and when the raid would happen. The perfect timing and the massive dollar amount immediately raised suspicions and outrage. A short time ago in the Oval Office, President Trump weighed in.
The whole world, unfortunately, has become somewhat of a casino. And you look at what's going on all over the world, in Europe and every place they're doing these betting things. I was never much in favor of it. I don't like it conceptually, but it is what it is. No, I think that I'm not happy with any of that stuff.
No arguing with the president there. Prediction markets have never been so popular. The top 2 platforms, Kalshi and Polymarket, reached new record highs last month, luring more than 55 million visitors between them, including some who apparently don't care about the rules. And when it comes to matters like military operations or even elections, you don't want people who can influence the outcome betting on it. As the companies crack down, Kalshi is kicking 3 congressional candidates off of its platform, accusing them of betting on their own elections. Republican House candidate from Texas, Ezequiel Enriquez, also Democratic Minnesota State Senator Matt Klein, who is running for a seat in Congress, they're both suspended from Kalshi trades for 5 years. But a third candidate the company accuses of insider trading says he has nothing to be sorry for. He is the long-shot independent Senate candidate in Virginia, Mark Moran, and he claims he was planning to be caught all along. Mark Moran joins me now. Mark, tell me what your plan was. What did you bet and what were you planning?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Elizabeth. So going back about 2 years ago, I started tweeting about the potential for the opportunity for prediction markets, that they were going to overtake polls. And when you think about the role of polls in media, polls inform media, they drive media. Media drives the voter and perception of the candidate. So I see these prediction markets, and I look at this as an area rife for the opportunity to sway an election entirely.
How do you sway an
Going back
election by
to
making a bet, though?
Sure. So because the prediction markets are in real time versus polls that only come out every so often, you're able to take a certain dollar amount that you can very much understand and gamify to gradually increase the percentage or decrease the percentage of your opponent, however you'd want to do that. All of that money is going to then go into media, which normally through FEC reporting would be disclosed, but this can all be a dark pool where money comes in and our democracy can be sold.
So you're essentially saying that if you and 10 of your own friends all bet enough on you to win, that Kalshi is going to suddenly show, oh, Mark Moran is the leading candidate. He's got a lot of support, and therefore start the whole momentum in the campaign. But you placed how many bets? One?
Well, to that, it would depend on how rich my friends were, right? Now,
True.
depending on the gravity of the situation, going back to October when I discovered this going on in the New York City mayoral race, and the New York Post reports about it, that's what began this whole fascination, to understand that there could be evil or foreign forces against candidates working against them to further destroy our country. So for me, this New York Post article comes out in October, and it says that I'm running for Congress. So that's public information. And then I asked the head of politics at Kalshi to add me to this market. So for them to now come back and use the term insider trading is rather interesting to me, because you notice them coming out yesterday and Polymarket coming out today.
Right. You were just betting on you winning. Is that what you were betting on? You haven't told me precisely what your bet was.
That I would run for office.
So the bet was simply that you would run.
Correct. $100.
So you bet $100 that you would run, and then after you placed your bet, you announced you were running?
I placed the bet after I was added to the market.
Right, but had you announced publicly that you were running?
The New York Post article had.
Had you called a news conference or issued a press release to say I'm running for Congress or Senate?
Well, it wouldn't matter because no one would pay attention to me. I actually had an exclusive with The Hill for when I announced, but then that got dropped because no one wanted to hear about my ideas, so I had to use a little bit of attention to get people to listen.
When was that?
January 21st.
So it was after you placed your bet. That's why they're saying it was insider trading.
Correct.
Okay. So you said you wanted to get caught. Why did you want to get caught?
Well, first, for insider trading, there has to be possession of material non-public information, right? The information was out there. So to me, all lights go. Now, why did I want to do it? Because as Donald Trump just said, the whole world is a casino. And who's going to stop that from overtaking our politics when we already have dark money coming in through 501c4s, when any billionaire can control any politician? I don't see this as a fair game, and I view that's why society in America is crumbling, because money controls our elections and has more power than the people.
Don't you think these special interest groups...
So this is just the next iteration of it. No one figured it out.
Right. I mean, listen, you're right. It's part of a bigger problem. We've got all sorts of, big pharma, AIPAC, all these groups that are, dumping a ton of money behind candidates who promise they will do whatever they can to help big pharma or help Israel. Is this a big deal? Like, this feels like sort of small potatoes when it comes to the amount of money spent.
The $100 absolutely is. That's to prove a point. That's to get attention, which I did. For $100, got global attention. Now that we're here, the point is these two companies, they announce these settlements within a day of each other. Now, why is that? Because I have a prediction there will be a congressional inquiry into the involvement of prediction markets when it comes to politics.
Wait, you have another bet?
I fully believe.
You placed another bet?
No. That's just me personally. I know my vices, Elizabeth, so I don't bet.
Okay. I was like, Mark, I thought you got banned. I mean, how is this happening? Super quick, I've only got 10 seconds. What did you make of the indictment of a U.S. Army soldier who was involved in the planning and execution of the raid on Nicolas Maduro and bet like hours before the raid happens and cleaned up with more than $400,000? I mean, just indicted.
I think it's disgusting that a multi-billion-dollar corporation would throw a United States soldier on the bus when they know for a fact, and it will come out in testimony, that they have allowed this for sure in many markets, and to throw him under the bus, I think is wrong.
Well, he's the one who made the bet with classified secret information, so we shall see what happens in that case. Mark Moran, good luck on the campaign trail. Thanks so much. All right, coming up, he's not just saying no. He's saying let's rewind this and do this again. He's not saying no from psychedelics to marijuana. We're trying to do the Nancy Reagan just say no thing. President Trump is saying yes to medical marijuana and to psychedelics. This is a real shift in the Republican Party attitude about some formerly outlawed recreational drugs. We're going to get into that next. So we're just a few days past 420, but there's another reason cannabis users are feeling euphoric. The Trump administration announced today it's reclassifying state-licensed medical marijuana as a less dangerous drug. This move is something many see as a first step toward reclassifying the drug completely. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche signed the order that changed cannabis from Schedule I to Schedule III. The acting AG said it would enable a more targeted and rigorous research process into marijuana's safety and efficacy. The move does not legalize cannabis completely, but it does remove some serious roadblocks. It will expedite the process for state-licensed medical marijuana operators to register with the DEA. It will also legitimize American medical marijuana programs in the 40 states that have some sort of legalization already. And it'll make it easier for researchers to obtain cannabis for medical studies. Now, this is all just days after Trump signed an executive order to expedite research into the use of psychedelic drugs as potential medical treatments. Advocates have long argued that marijuana and these psychedelics have a variety of medical benefits. But critics say today's marijuana has become so potent that it can also pose a threat to mental health. Joining us now is Batya Ungar-Sargon, who's the host of Batya on NewsNation, and Mike Nellis, a former senior advisor to the Kamala Harris campaign. Great to have you both. So, Mike, reclassifying medical marijuana, this comes just days after the president ordered the FDA to speed up its study on psychedelics like ibogaine. What do you make of the fact that both of these moves are happening in such rapid succession?
Yeah, well, I think two things here. One, they're the right moves. I think it's time for us to start listening to the science and moving where things have been heading for a long time, and that's toward, at a minimum, decriminalization, if not legalization. And we're also going to have to focus on restorative justice, because right now in marijuana in particular, there are an insane amount of people who are in prison right now for something that probably should not be illegal and is not illegal in many states right now. And so that's number one. And so I applaud the Trump administration's moves here, all right? And that's a hard thing for me to say because I'm not a big fan of this White House, but it's the right thing. Now, I think the motivation behind it is where I probably have some qualms, because I think this is more of a political play than a sincere move forward towards legalization. I think Donald Trump is looking at his polling, particularly with young men. He's losing some of these podcasters like Joe Rogan, who was at the White House for the executive order signing.
Front and center, right there.
Right, he's pandering a little bit here, and I think that just goes to show you how weak his position is right now.
I just don't want to have to smell the marijuana everywhere I go on New York City streets. I find
I prefer a gummy, Elizabeth.
Well, I just don't understand. We have laws against open carry. You can't, drink a lot of alcohol on the street. Why are you allowed to stand there and pollute the air with your foul-smelling marijuana? Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I'm with you. You're right about that.
Yeah. Okay, Batya, I don't know if you heard the interview I just did with Mark Moran, who's been kicked off Kalshi for betting on himself. But, we also have two other candidates who also bet on themselves kicked off. These were small dollar bets, but this comes like literally moments before this show went on the air. We had this American soldier who was just indicted by the Department of Justice for placing like 14 bets he was helping plan and execute the raid himself and was using that information. These poly market sites, these prediction market sites, are really turning into a real dangerous territory here.
Thank you so much for having me. I have to applaud Mike, first of all, because, he doesn't just do the party line. He likes something Trump did, and he said it. And that is why NewsNation is the best, because you get people who are honest and willing to say that. I'm not a fan of what Trump is doing, and I have no problem saying that either. I think that this, it's a slippery slope. I think there's a lot of evidence that marijuana is really bad for young men in large quantities. So I think it's bad. Mike thinks it's good, and we have no problem saying that. About the betting markets, it's the same thing. Why are we legalizing things that used to be vices that we understood were destructive to society, destructive to our morals? Listening to your amazing interview 5 minutes ago, he literally could not compute how having rich friends was going to make him more viable. It was he could not compute. He had no clue what you were saying to him, but it's so obvious that all this does is allow people to combine vice and money and alter our politics. Every article now starts with, Kalshi markets are saying this. You know why? Because they're funding media. They're not idiots, I think it's just terrible, and I think the government should be shutting this stuff down.
Mike, it's not just, the prediction markets, it's the stock market where there are all these suspicious trades on oil where somebody, made out with millions of dollars in profit by placing a suspiciously timed sell order or buy order on oil moments before President Trump made some announcement that had a huge impact on markets.
Yeah, I mean, there's an incredible amount of market manipulation and corruption happening in Washington right now. It's happening in Congress through insider trading. It's happening on political campaigns, and it's happening inside the Trump administration right now. We know that because how else do they know to place these bets? Somebody somewhere inside that organization, whether or not it's Donald Trump, his kids, or anybody else, they are placing bets that they should not, and it should absolutely be illegal. And I'll make news again. I'll agree with Donald Trump because in his press conference there, he said it's probably not a good idea to turn everything into a casino, and I agree with him on that. But then the next thing he said right after that was, well, it is what it is. And I don't like hearing the leader of the free world say it is what it is when he has the power to rally his party in the House and the Senate to go pass legislation to at a minimum regulate this stuff and find the right place for it. And I'm far from a prude. I used to be a professional poker player. I gamble all the time. I was playing blackjack in Detroit just 2 nights ago. But this stuff is gross. And one thing I'll add too, because I thought Mark Moran embarrassed himself. And I thought, by the way, you did a great job, Elizabeth, pushing back on him. But these sites, Kalshi and Polymarket and the rest of them, they're trying to pay people like Batya and I to go out and sell their stuff. I've had to turn them down multiple times for an insane amount of money. They're like, if you just post the updates on the market, we'll pay you $5,000 a month. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to compromise myself.
Yeah. Okay, I'm switching gears here because Batya, I know I've been reading your Twitter feed. I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't care. You are fired up over this indictment of the SPLC on charges of funding far-right racist groups. The group is accused of paying informants who helped organize the white supremacy march in Charlottesville, North Carolina. I know I'll give you a chance to explain it, but I also want you to explain why it's any different if the allegations in the indictment are true, why it's any different from what the FBI has been doing for decades. It pays $42 million a year to informants who are members of hate groups just like this.
Well, because the FBI is paying people for evidence of crimes, which they then go on to prosecute, right? The SPLC is not going to do that. They were literally subsidizing the very white supremacy and racism they claim to be fighting. And the reason this matters so much, Elizabeth, is because that scene where Donald Trump was alleged by the media to have said there were fine people on both sides about the neo-Nazis, that clip was shortened, and so they cut out the part where he said, I'm obviously not talking about the neo-Nazis. But that clip was played ad infinitum, and the doctored version was cited as recently as 2024 by Obama when he was endorsing Kamala Harris. Yeah. It was the reason that Joe Biden ran in 2020. It turns out not only was that clip doctored and not true, the event itself was organized by a leftist group that paid somebody $270,000.
I'm not sure the indictment says that.
It does.
The indictment does not say that, by
it absolutely does say that.
I think we'll, okay. Sadly,
I can read it to you right now.
We will, you know what? We will continue talking in the commercial break, and our poor audience will miss out on hearing more. But that is in dispute, I will say that. And this is an indictment, which is not proof of anything. As we know, every time somebody's indicted of a crime, the prosecutors have to go make their case, and we shall see. And we will follow that case very, very closely. Mike Nellis, Batya Angar-Sargon, thank you all so much. And tonight, NewsNation's Katie Pavlich will be speaking with acting U.S. Attorney Todd Blanche about this case. So tune in tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. Coming up for us, did the Pima County Sheriff's behavior botch the Guthrie search from the beginning? One member of the Board of Supervisors says yes, and he joins me live next. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is nearing the 3-month mark tonight, with no new leads, no arrests, and most importantly, no sign of Nancy Guthrie. Skepticism and scrutiny of the investigation, on the other hand, are in abundance, particularly regarding Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. Since there is no progress to report, many are asking why. And now it's more than just bad PR. Sheriff Nanos is the focus of a probe himself, and it could cost him his job. It's not for his present actions, however, with the Guthrie investigation. It's rather about allegations in his past. The Pima County Board of Supervisors is leading the investigation after reports that Sheriff Nanos misrepresented his work history on his resume while he was at the El Paso Police Department before he joined Pima County's. The board demanded Nanos disclose all circumstances about his departure from the El Paso department and to clarify the dates of his employment as well as any prior disciplinary actions. Nanos' attorney responded yesterday with a 22-page document. It reads in part that whatever the sheriff did or did not do before being elected is necessarily unrelated to his performance of his duties in office. Whether others agree remains to be seen. The board will review the sheriff's answers in an executive session in a few weeks. For more, we're joined by Dr. Matthew Hines, Vice Chair for the Pima County Board of Supervisors. Matthew, it's great to have you. Did he refuse to answer the questions about disciplinary action that was taken against him at the El Paso Police Department?
Yeah, it certainly seems pretty problematic to me. I mean, I've reviewed his responses with my team, with some other lawyers as well, and I'm certainly not satisfied with these responses. And what he did in El Paso, I mean, one of the things he was suspended for, 37 days of suspension in El Paso. 15 of those days occurred after he beat almost to death a handcuffed robbery suspect who was in the back of a squad car with a flashlight. He's a bad cop. He made really bad decisions and then lied about his past to convince then Pima County officials to hire him back in 1984. He also lied about that gap in time. He used to say 1982, so that got changed. But the point here is this man, we shouldn't even know his name. We should not know the name Nanos. He has perpetrated a fraud for 4 decades upon my community, and it is, frankly, it's shameful and insulting to the 1,500 men and women of that amazing law enforcement agency that he heads currently. Every day he walks in the door.
That story of beating a suspect who was handcuffed with a flashlight until you say beat him nearly to death. Were there charges filed? I mean, that would certainly seem to call for some criminal charges.
The El Paso Police Department was sued over this matter, and eventually that was one of the things that led the El Paso Police Department to force him to resign in lieu of termination. That gentleman was put in the ICU for days, and there were multiple news stories about that at the time when it happened.
What do you make? I mean, he is saying, look, whatever I did or didn't do decades ago has nothing to do with how I'm leading the Guthrie investigation and how I'm currently serving as sheriff of Pima County. You clearly don't buy that.
Not at all. Look, these actions are incredibly significant. The fact that he came to Pima County and the first official act that he did here was to lie about his history, and that's how he got peace officer certification. Nobody can be serving in law enforcement at any level in the state of Arizona unless they get peace officer certification, and he he could not have possibly revealed that history to the board at the time that this happened, that he got a job. And that means he perpetrated a fraud for decades upon the people of my community.
And how do you think he has handled the Nancy Guthrie investigation? As you know, there's been a lot of questions about how we handled the crime scene, how we handled the DNA evidence. What is your assessment?
So I'm a physician and a supervisor on the board. I am not in law enforcement, but I will say relationships in these kinds of situations matter and time matters. And I say that because it is pretty clear that his past run-ins with the Federal Bureau of Investigation back in 2015, when he was almost indicted for RICO charges at the time, which they did not end up going forward with, he has held a grudge against the FBI and refused to fully work with them going forward. And I think we see examples of the results of that with regard to the most recent high-profile investigation.
And perhaps maybe jeopardized elements of that, do you think, yes or no?
Very possible.
Matthew Hines, keep us posted. Very important what you're saying. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Chris Cuomo joins me live next. We'll be right back. All right, plenty of things happening in the world. Chris Cuomo joins me now. You're obviously going to lead with, the president had a lot to say about Iran today, but you're also talking with Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna about the missing national security insiders, about the Epstein files, a whole lot more.
Yeah, I mean, we have really increasing demands for transparency and accountability. I mean, I've never covered, I mean, you and I have been covering conflict together for almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. I've never been in a situation where I was like, do I believe what the Taliban is saying or the U.S. government? Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or the U.S. government? But here we are with the most pernicious, the worst of all the terror organizations. And it seems like they're giving us a straighter account of the state of play than we're getting at home.
I don't know about that.
Very frustrating.
Really? They're putting out those AI videos, those staged, videos.
Oh, sure,
of here
sure.
We are,
they're propagandists. They're propagandists. They're liars. They are the worst. There's no question. But is this straight open or closed? Did they hit the ships there or not?
Yeah.
Are they negotiating or not? Are they in disarray or not? Are the current assemblage of guys who we're dealing with more reasonable or not? All of those answers we know, and we know them because of what the regime has said, not the U.S. government. That's my point.
Okay. I'll let you get at it then.